Hello, everyone, and welcome to WriterSpeak, dedicated to the written word and those who produce it. I am an author of 3 historical fictions about women during World War II. Today in our studio, I'm very happy to introduce Janine Halloran, author of Coping Skills for Kids workbook. Welcome, Janine.
Thanks for having me, Jeannie. I'm so glad to be here.
Yes, I just loved your book. I think the graphic illustrations are so colorful that children will probably naturally gravitate towards it.
Thank you. That was one of my favorite parts of actually making the book, was making the illustrations.
So you made them yourself?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yes, I did.
Wow, that's an added talent that you have.
Thank you very much.
So it's really very friendly.
Yes, I tried to make it as kid-friendly as possible.
So tell us, Janine, what is your professional background that enabled you to write a workbook about coping skills?
Oh, sure. I'm a licensed mental health counselor back in my state of Massachusetts, where I'm originally from. And I've been working with children and adolescents and their families for over 15 years. And one of the things I noticed as I was working with kids in different settings, I would work with kids in schools and in outpatient clinics and in individual groups, individuals and in groups of kids working. And what I discovered was kids just needed more help figuring out healthy ways to cope with stress.
So speaking about stress, in your book you said there is good stress and bad stress. Yes. I found that fascinating, so tell us about that.
Sure. I think one of the things that people sometimes mistake is that stress is all bad. Not all stress is bad. When you have to give a presentation or a speech or you have an exam coming up for kids in school and they have to take a test, there's a little bit of anxiety and stress that's good. It's good because it helps you focus, it helps you focus on the task at hand, and it helps you concentrate better. But then it's good to have a balance. If you have too much stress, then you sort of go into that flight, fight, or freeze mode, and then you really can't think. It's like your brain freezes. But it's good to have a little bit of stress. It helps you focus and concentrate and do as well as you can on the exam.
Well, that's very interesting. I was wondering, what ages would you say this workbook is appropriate for?
I'd say it's appropriate for kindergarten through grade 6. I would say for the younger kids, obviously they can't read it by themselves, so it would be helpful if they had a trusted adult, a parent, a school counselor, an outside therapist to work with them through the workbook. But for older kids, they can read it on their own. And I wrote it specifically so that kids who are older, in the older grades of elementary school, could actually do it on their own and read through it on their own, and seek out an adult when they needed help on specific ones, if it became too complicated or they wanted some clarification on something. But usually elementary school is the target audience.
Mm-hmm. I know in your book it says that some of the activities children can do alone, but others they're supervised activities.
Yes.
Can you give me an example of each of those?
Sure. So at the beginning of the book, I talk a lot about calm breathing and making sure that you're taking deep breaths. That's something that you can do by yourself. You don't need an adult to help you to learn to take deep breaths. In the book, I go through the importance of taking a deep breath from your belly and using shapes to be able to do that, or using bubbles. Those are activities kids can do by themselves. Another example of a coping skill that I think is a really great one for kids, but requires supervision, is something like baking or cooking. So kids who are 6 or 7 aren't allowed to use a stove by themselves, aren't allowed to use an oven by themselves, but it would be helpful if they had supervision to be able to do those activities.
Yeah, I see what you mean now by supervision.
Yes.
With the stove. There are 4 basic categories in your book, Coping with Kids. I mean, coping skills for kids. And what are those 4 categories?
Sure. The 4 categories are calming skills, distraction skills, processing skills, and physical skills. And I know it might seem a little funny to have 4 different sections of it, but a couple of years ago I was sitting and I was talking with some groups of kids about coping skills, and it seemed like the list kept getting longer and longer. But as we were talking, it felt like, somebody was saying, well, this would help me calm down, and this is helpful if I have like too much energy. And then I realized that most coping skills can fall into these 4 categories. And that's what really led me to sort of divide it up to make it a little bit easier for people to figure out what coping skill they need to use at what time.
It sounds like your work really helped you write this book, and children you worked with also, in a way. Absolutely.
This is an outgrowth of what I've noticed with kids and families, adolescents, even the adults that I do work with occasionally. It really has helped formulate what I think makes the most sense and what I've seen work for people.
So can you give me an example of an activity to do in each of the categories?
Absolutely.
I think we would understand them more then.
Right. It definitely makes sense if you have an example. Examples always help. So, for instance, when you're talking about calming skills, that's a time when you need to relax, a time you need to calm down, sort of settle your body. So, one of the things that I always talk about is taking deep breaths and just being able to relax in a situation. So for instance, if you were going in and you have to give a class presentation, and this has happened with one of my clients, she has a really hard time whenever she has to give a class presentation. So we've worked on breathing from your belly. So you breathe in and expand your belly, and breathe out and contract your belly. So that's an example of something that helps you calm down. An example of something that is a distraction, actually one of my favorite things to do with my own children, and what's something that they really enjoy, is creating art, creating something beautiful, creating something with different materials, and that's just a great way to be able to distract yourself. There are certain times and certain experiences where you just have to wait, and there's nothing you can do to change and make the stress go away or make the anxiety go away, but what you can do is distract yourself. And so by using something like creating art, it's a distraction. In terms of doing something physical, a lot of times when people are experiencing anxiety, they go into fight, flight, or freeze, and your body fills with adrenaline, and you need to get that adrenaline out. So one of the things that you can do is do something physical, like do jumping jacks or push-ups or sit-ups, just doing something physical to get that adrenaline and that energy out of your body.
I know that you talk about yoga. What category would you put yoga in?
So yoga is interesting because yoga can fall under calming, but it can also fall under physical. So it depends, and I actually have it in both places in the book because, yoga can be really calming, but it is a great physical way for you to get some of that energy out of your body. And I think the last category I haven't talked about is processing. So processing is really trying to get to the root of what's going on. What is making you anxious? What is causing you anxiety? So one of the things that I really like to do, just in general, is making sure that people understand what they're feeling and understanding that there's a range of emotion. You can feel a little anxious, medium anxious, or like really big anxious. And knowing that that's expected and knowing that that's okay, and figuring out things you can do when you're just a little anxious versus super anxious is really helpful for people.
That was great explanation of the categories.
Thank you.
I noticed there were a lot of art activities in your workbook.
Yes.
I had never heard of many of them. One was filling a balloon, even.
Yes.
Maybe you can explain that one a little bit.
Oh, sure. So, a lot of times, one of the things that comes up a lot is people talk about stress balls and using a stress ball. They're everywhere. There's ones with little smiley faces. There's ones that look like a globe. There's ones that have little spikes on them. But sometimes it's fun to actually create your own. And so what I wrote in the book was just an explanation of how you can make your own stress ball at home. So you can use different materials and see which one works best for you. Some common materials that people use include flour or dried lentils or cornstarch even. It depends on what sort of texture you're going for, and how strong you want the ball to be, how squishy do you want it to be. Play-Doh is another thing you can put in it, and that makes a really squishy one. But flour makes a much more, it's less malleable, but it's better for kids who really want to squeeze hard. So it depends on what you
in a
want.
way, you can have several different kinds of stress balls.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is that your own original idea?
It is not my own original idea.
I just had never heard of it before, and I used to work with children. So I was impressed by that.
Oh, thank you. It's actually, I started doing that right at the beginning of my career. Somebody had mentioned, you can put these things inside a balloon, and you can make your own stress ball. And then a couple of years ago, I had an intern at my school. He was working to become a school counselor as well. And he brought in this whole bag of materials, and he was the one who taught me about the lentils. I never thought about the lentils before. Because if a stress ball explodes with flour, it really gets all over the place.
And I guess it could.
It could. It happens. With lentils, it's a little bit easier for cleanup in case it happens. But it was just, it was interesting to see that you could use different materials. And then thinking about the Play-Doh was really fun. So it was interesting to sort of play with that, to figure out, well, which one do I like better?
You also have designed these very interesting checklists that a child or with an adult can cross off or check or circle.
Yes.
Can you explain the checklists a little bit?
Sure. So in the book, to go along with all the different coping skills that there are, I made a checklist. And so basically what you do, before you even begin going through the book, you can go through the checklist and check off the coping skills you already do, because you know that those are ones that work for you, and so you don't really need to go and practice that. You can circle the ones you want to try, and that's the most important one, because I always think it's really good to have a variety of coping skills to use, and because different coping skills work in different situations. And you can't, for instance, you can't take a nap at school, but you could take a nap at home. So it's just nice to be able to have different coping skills you can use in different areas in your life and at different times, depending on what's bothering you. So then the last thing I always tell people is cross off the ones that you know don't work for you. But I always want people to give it a try before they cross it off. There are certain things that I know just don't work for people. Sometimes I had a client actually the worry box just wasn't her thing. She did not like it, it didn't work, and so we tried it a couple of times, and then we decided we're not going to do that anymore. It's not something that really is helpful to you, so let's cross it off the list. But for another client, it could really work very well. So it just depends on the person and what works for them, but also just give things a try.
Yeah, I thought it was very clever to tell children, you cross this off, but would you be interested in giving it a try?
Right.
Possibly because as a therapist, you liked that one because it has worked so many times.
Right.
Yeah. I think it's a good technique to say to children, will you give this a try, or could you give this a try?
Right, and it's interesting, after working with people over time, things that didn't work at the beginning might work a year or two later. So it's always just good to go back and revisit. Is this something that maybe I could try now? Maybe I didn't like yoga 2 years ago, but I'm going to give it a try now.
You were talking about your children. I was curious as to how old they were.
Yes, I have a 6-year-old boy and an 8-year-old girl.
And do you now, or have you used the workbook with your own children?
I have, actually. The coping skills checklist I actually have just updated with both of my children, just because I think it's good to go back through and see if the things have changed that they like and don't like. My son, he's in 1st grade now, but during his kindergarten year, he really struggled behaviorally. Not at school. He was a perfect angel at school. He did the work. He was following directions. But it was full-day kindergarten, and he was exhausted. And so he would come home, and he would fall apart. And he had some really big feelings and really big behaviors. And so my husband and I just looked at each other, and we really thought, okay, we need to really build up his skill set and how to manage his big feelings. So we went through, and we figured out which ones worked, and we tried some that didn't work. And we were able to help him come up with a good set of skills that he can use to be able to manage his feelings. Is it perfect every day? Absolutely not, because he's a child and he's a human, and nobody has a perfect day. But it's much, much better than it was, and he's able to use his words and express himself and manage his big feelings in a healthy and safe way.
He's very lucky. Now, we've talked a lot about stress, and you also have written a lot about anger.
Yes.
That anger thermometer was very interesting to me, as well as colorful. So tell us about the anger thermometer.
Oh, sure. So the anger thermometer, it's actually something that, again, it's something I started using very early in my career. So you really want to try and figure out what makes putting different sort of expressions of anger on the thermometer in different places. So what makes somebody a little bit angry? What does it look like when you're just a little bit angry? What does it look like when you're medium sort of angry? And what does it look like when you're big angry? So maybe when you're just a little bit angry, you might growl or stomp your feet. When you're like in the middle of anger, like starting to get really angry, maybe you start yelling. And maybe really very angry looks like you're throwing things. That's what happens when you're very angry. So with the feelings thermometer, you identify what those things are, and then you come up with different things that you can do at each of those levels to sort of help mitigate and manage the big feelings of anger and get you back down to a state where you're not so angry.
And getting back to stress a little, you do have charts on stress.
Yes.
That are very helpful.
Yes, I think one of the things with stress is you want to make sure that you understand what exactly is causing it. You can feel it, but then it's really helpful in order to tackle how to manage it, to know what's causing it. Because there's this bodily, visceral reaction to the stress where you feel all this adrenaline and you're struggling and your mind gets cloudy, but how do you manage it? What's causing you the stress? And then you can tackle it a little bit easier when you know what's making you stressed out.
I really like that you put in your book what signs parents should look for to seek professional help.
Yes. Yes. For kids, people go through days and have times where it's a little bit more stressful or more anxious, or more anxiety-provoking, but it's really important to know when you need to seek out professional help. And it's really about how is it impacting their daily living. Are they behaving differently at school than they have? Significantly. Is it significantly different? Are they acting out more? Are they crying for a significant period of time, meaning more than 2 weeks? Are they sleeping differently? Are they sleeping a lot or not really sleeping at all? How are their eating habits? Has that really changed significantly? Are they being unsafe? Are they talking about wanting to hurt themselves or other people? And I know it's scary for parents to think about that, but young children say those things and have those feelings and thoughts. And so it's good to know and to be aware and notice when those things are happening, and then to be able to seek out professional help when needed.
That's very helpful, to focus in on the eating.
Yes.
The sleeping.
Right.
I think you have to really be a very big caring parent to be really zeroing in on sleeping and eating. Well, not eating necessarily, but sleeping. Well, you know.
Yes, and I mean, it's a little bit trickier with teenagers as well.
Yeah.
But if you're noticing that your child is really having a hard time going to sleep and staying to sleep for more than a week or two, that's concerning.
Or they're tired,
yes.
And you're totally unaware that they haven't been sleeping.
Exactly.
And then you realize, oh, well, they're tired.
Yeah, you have to sort of be a detective.
Yeah, that's a good way. That's a good way to look at it, is you are a detective if you want to be a good parent in a way. Yeah. It's to find the hidden signs.
Right.
So how would someone find a good therapist?
I think there's a few different places you can start when you're looking to find a therapist for your child. I actually think it's really important to start with your child's pediatrician. I think one of the things that pediatricians can really do is sort of help point you in the right direction. Some pediatricians' offices even have therapists on site. My child's pediatrician has that, actually, which is really very helpful. But even if they don't have somebody on site, they have people that they like to refer to and know and feel comfortable about the kind of work that they do. And so I think it's good to look there. Practically, I think it's also very good to look and see what your insurance covers. I know it's not necessarily a great place to just look for, who is a good therapist, but it's good to know who will be covered. It's important for a family to know that, who's going to be covered.
Well, it is different than when you have an illness.
Right.
Because usually you have to go every week to have good therapy occur.
Right. Exactly.
That can be an added expense.
Absolutely. And so it's a big deal. If a person's not covered, then you really have to think carefully about what you want out of a therapeutic relationship, you know. And you could also check with the school's counselor. Usually the school counselor will have referrals and have people that they refer to on a regular basis. And another place that actually is really great to check is psychologytoday.com. Oh. So they actually have a lot of therapists listed on there by state, by zip, so you can search by zip code or by area, and that's a great place to start as well. In terms of a good therapist, I always want to find somebody who is empathetic, who will listen. That is honestly one of the most important ingredients. It's a caring adult. Somebody who cares, somebody who's listening, somebody who is respecting your way of parenting and being able to help you figure out some other things that might help you, and being able to talk respectfully to you and your child. It's about kindness and respect.
It's actually two good qualities for a parent.
Yes.
You have a really terrific website, which we will list on the credits at the end of the show. And you have resources listed on your website. Can you tell us a few of the resources?
Sure, absolutely. So I have the workbook for sale on the website, but I also have some companion cue cards that go along with it. So for each coping skill, I actually have a visual that can be useful for kids. And it's divided by the different categories. So that I have a set of calming coping skills cards, and a set of physical ones, and a set of distracting ones. So it all goes along with the workbook. It's a complimentary sort of product that goes along with it.
Oh, that's great.
And I also have some free checklists. There's a free version of the checklist on the website and a free free thermometer on the website, actually.
Great.
And then I also have some other products that can be useful as coping skills for kids. So I have some tangles that I love. So it's sort of a fidget that's a great thing for kids to use at home or at school if they're feeling anxious or worried or stressed out. Just being able to hold something and feel something tactile like the fidget is such a helpful thing. I felt it was so helpful that I wanted to sell it on my own site.
So this is a product that's made?
Yep.
Oh.
It's made. It's made by the Tangle company.
And it's called the Fidget?
Yeah, it's Tangle Fidgets.
Tangle Fidget.
Yeah, so I have a few different versions of that on there. And then I also have a calming jar, and the calming jar and the Zen Garden are part of the Coping Skills Workbook, but I actually do sell those as separate physical products on the site. And then I, have also found other things that are really helpful, and they're available via Amazon on the site as well.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, then everybody will look forward to seeing your website and using it.
Thank you so much.
Sounds like a good resource. In your index, I saw that you had a list of good parenting books to read. And I wanted to know what your favorite parenting book was as a parent.
Gosh, that's tough.
I knew you'd have trouble with that, but
it is a little tough. So I guess, and this is such a classic therapist response, it depends on what you're looking for.
It depends always works.
So if you're looking for a basic, a simple sort of way to structure your house and structure your discipline and structure consequences in your home and just setting up a home environment that is helpful for your child and respectful, and making sure that people are able to follow rules, but also making sure that there's a connection between the two of you, I definitely recommend 1, 2, 3 Magic.
1, 2, 3 Magic.
Yes, okay. That is actually my husband's favorite parenting
It's a nice
book.
Name.
And the
nice title.
It's a great book. It was actually recommended to us by our pediatrician when our son was really struggling. And so it's really, my husband is a little bit more hesitant to read parenting books, but he really got into this one. And so I find that that's really helpful, when both parents are on board and, doing the same thing. It's really helpful.
Yes.
And it really made a huge difference in terms of how we parented and how we interacted with our children. And I loved it. Another book that I absolutely adore is Bloom Parenting. So if you are struggling with particular issues with your child, if your child is biting or hitting, or if they are experiencing grief, or if they have experienced trauma, having a hard time getting to school, Bloom goes and breaks it down by those specific categories, and there's several more as well. So if there's something specific that you really want to get targeted help with, Bloom is the way to go.
That's good that you recommend 2 different types of parenting books, really. I wanted to know if you offer your coping skills as a telephone consultation or online.
So right now I have some clients that I do see currently. I'm not accepting any clients right now, but that will be changing come January 2017. So at that point, I'm going to be starting to open up my practice again and accepting new clients and doing some more phone consultations and online consultations at that point as well.
On your website, is it listed how to contact you?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Good, okay. So, do you think you will write another book after this big adventure?
I absolutely will. This was a passion project of mine, and I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it.
It really shows. It really does.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great writing it. It was fun writing it. It was fun practicing and going through some of the coping skills with my own children. I definitely want to write something. A lot of times when people see the book and read the book, one of the things that a lot of parents have said to me is, I need something like this. So it sort of has started my wheels turning about making something for parents. I also have thought about
coping skills for parents. Yes.
And then also
Yes.
potentially for teenagers, because this is geared towards a younger audience.
Yeah.
I'd love to make something for the slightly older audience as well, of the teenage, sort of that teen.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I was thinking it was a lower level, and I didn't know how well the workbook would cross over for teenagers.
They wouldn't really look at them. Yeah. I recognize that about
there
teens.
you go.
They need something a little bit different, but I think I could write something for them as well. So I have lots of ideas just spinning in my head, but those are the two that really are next on my plate to do.
Where can we buy this wonderful workbook of yours, Janine?
So you can visit copingskillsforkids.com, FOR, and you can buy the book there, or you can visit Amazon.com. It's available on Amazon as well.
And thank you so much for sharing with us your very practical book, Coping Skills with Kids.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeannie.
I would like to thank our sponsors, the C Media Lab of Santa Rosa and the Sonoma County Gazette. Please join us next time for another exciting episode of WriterSpeak.